Who do the Steelers take with the 17th overall pick, or do they trade up? We're going to examine what Omar Khan has done so far and how different it is to the Kevin Colbert practices of old for the Pittsburgh Steelers. That we're going to go over our full locked on mock draft, where you see my 17th overall pick compared to how the rest of the hosts on the Locked On podcast that were picked for their teams, and who should the Steelers take at 32. To talk about that, we got Brooke Pryor of ESPN right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things in the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting app, but especially on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed it on YouTube. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making the Locked On Steelers podcast your first listen every day, because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by HelloFresh. Skip trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. That's why it's America's #1 meal kit. Go to HelloFresh.com/NFL60 and use code NFL60 for 60% off plus free shipping. I use HelloFresh. It is awesome. So do check that out. As I said before, we're joined by Brooke Pryor of ESPN. Brooke, it's been a minute since we have on the show. It's so good to have you back. How are you enjoying not having to be at the Steelers facility every single day?
It's been nice, although I miss having the structure because I don't do well when I don't have anything to do. So I'm not going to lie. Like, I'm excited for the draft because it's going to give me things to do. Like, I know what I'm going to be doing at what time, and it's not just like filling in with doing random mock drafts and reading random mock drafts.
If I didn't have Locked On Steelers and like all the jobs that I do, I would definitely be binging way too many shows, and I'm right with you. Like, I'd just be flying through things there.
Yeah, that's why I finished all of Love is Blind and The Reunion, and I'm now like deep into the TikToks and Reddit threads about it. So, dear God, can we please get some more football players on this roster so that I have something else to do a deep dive in other than love lives of random strangers that are just messy and toxic.
Absolutely. We'll talk. I want to talk to you off camera about Marshall, Jackie, and Josh. But that being said, let's talk about Omar Khan, because one thing that we've seen is that, you know, the Steelers keep making moves this offseason. The trade to get Allen Robinson, that I think universally was widely applauded by Steelers fans and by analysts, because they didn't lose any draft stock by just swapping 7th round picks, and they're paying him $5 million. And there's nothing you really lose in that equation there. You talk about the other signings that they've made, getting Patrick Peterson, Isaac Samalo, Herbig, all, you know, down the line, getting all the guys that they have. And I think it starts the question, is this a change in philosophy for the Pittsburgh Steelers under Omar Khan and Andy Weidel, of course, being there as well? Or is this more so just they don't have to pay for Ben? Look at me hitting my mic here. They don't have to pay for Ben Roethlisberger and his huge contract that came with him being a franchise quarterback, and this is what that gives you as far as the opportunity.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I don't know that it's a wholesale philosophy change, because they're still not going out there and paying crazy top dollar for guys, right? I mean, they're not out here doing things like the Bears did, where the Bears were just spending like crazy. They also didn't have the same cap space as the Bears, but I don't think that we're seeing the Steelers, you know, throw tradition out the window and say, you know what, we're going to do whatever we want now. Omar Khan's not out here just writing blank checks to all the free agents. But I think he is enjoying the flexibility of not having a contract like Ben Roethlisberger's that he has to kind of tiptoe around and balance the checkbook with. I think that you're seeing him be able to go out there and do a combination of, it's not quite bargain bin hunting, but it is looking on the sale rack to an extent. He's not out here at Anthropologie being like, yes, I would love a $200 gold gilded trash can or whatever crazy thing they're saying. I say that like I don't love Anthropologie, but I love the sales section of Anthropologie because it's still expensive and it's still good quality stuff, but I know that I'm getting a deal on it. And that's kind of what he's gone out and done in the trade for Allen Robinson, in signing Cole Holcomb, in Patrick Peterson, same thing with Isaac Seumalo. I think that all of these guys are really quality, high caliber signings but he's just finessed it in a way, giving out these 2 and 3 year contracts. I mean, he's sticking to his guns, sticking to the Steelers tradition, not giving Bud Dupree the 1 year contract that he wanted because it's more beneficial for the Steelers to take a 2 year deal. And so I think that he's been very aggressive. He likes being called aggressive. It's what we learned at owners' meetings. He kind of laughed when someone brought up, hey, people are calling you aggressive. Do you feel like you are? And he's kind of like, yeah, I'm into that. But I think that the way that he has approached this free agency gives the Steelers a ton of flexibility in the draft. And so in that way, it is still the old Steelers model, right? Because they're not building their team through free agency. Free agency is supplementing what they're going to do in the draft. And I think that's why in some ways, in a lot of ways, it's frustrating that the draft happens after free agency. So you're kind of, signing guys without knowing exactly who you can get, how the board's going to fall in a couple months. But, I think that from all intents and purposes, Omar Khan has aced free agency, the first one that he's had complete control. And like you mentioned, Andy Weidel should absolutely not be overlooked. His value in the Eagles guys. Obviously there's a lot of linemen that he signed with Eagles ties, but I think that he's done a really good job with the talent evaluation, while you have guys like Cole Marco and Omar that are really helping make sure that everything fits and the checkbook is balanced.
I agree with you, and I think that sets up right now the Steelers. Like we've talked about, we talked about this with you last year. The goal with every free agency period is to set the roster to a base point where you don't have to be as predictable with getting a player. Now, last year, of course, they were taking a quarterback, and we all knew that they were going to do that, but it worked out because no one else was taking quarterbacks and they were able to get their guy. But this year feels a lot different. They've more solidified the linebacker room. They've more solidified cornerback. They went out and they got an extra receiver. So now that they could get a receiver, but they don't have to. They brought back Zach Gentry. They don't have to get a tight end. They could if they wanted to. But the same thing goes for the interior of the offensive line. The same thing goes for the safety room with Keanu Neal and bringing back KZ. Even the defensive line, going and getting Larry Ogunjobi, having the group that they have there. Across the board, you see there's a lot of solid this year. Now, you could still say offensive tackle. They didn't really add there at all. So, Raven Clark is a swing man that's going to come off the bench. So maybe that's still there. But I feel like this sets up the Steelers in a position to continue to be aggressive with the draft day. And I wanted to get your thoughts. Do you think it's a likelihood we're going to see a Steelers trade up or down on either of the first 2 days of the draft?
I kind of feel like yes, although that's with the caveat, it depends how the board falls, right? Of course. Because of all that flexibility that we just talked about. If the Steelers have a guy that they really, really want, say a Joey Porter Jr., and they start to get the feeling like, I really feel like one of these teams like the Commanders or the Patriots or a team that needs a corner in front of us, they might get him. You have so much more flexibility is the word of the day, apparently. But you do have so much more flexibility with the draft picks that you have going into this year. I mean, having 2 picks in the first 32 is huge, that you can really do whatever you want. You can trade out, you can trade back. I mean, there are so many different things that if you're Omar, this is a dream scenario for a general manager going into essentially his first time running the board himself. So I do think that they'll make some kind of trade because of what we've seen in free agency, and seeing just, how everything falls. But I kind of would be surprised if the Steelers stand pat with those first 3 picks.
I'm right with you. I think that this, again, it depends on who falls, because if the right guy falls at 17, there's no reason to trade. But I could see them saying, even if they get that, I could see them trading out of 32, getting more day 2 picks, and then even with that ammunition, trading up in the second round again to go get somebody, or making moves to get another 3rd round pick. I think that there's a lot of things that will be on the table. We've seen them be aggressive so far, and Omar Khan likes being called aggressive. So that could be a really good thing for if you're looking for that. So we're going to get to some more thoughts. We got the mock draft from the Locked On Podcast Network. I can now finally reveal to you guys everything and how it played out. I've been teasing this for like a week now since we recorded it. But before we do any of that, I want to talk to you guys about our great sponsors at Built Bar. And there's something exciting coming to Built.com on April 22nd. That is this weekend. I don't have all the details yet, but the excitement is real, and it's something that you don't want to miss. If you know how Built works, they have the most incredible protein bars in the world, and they all have these amazing flavor drops with unreal flavors in limited quantity. So mark your calendars and head to Built.com on Saturday, April 22nd, to be one of the first to discover what all the hype is about. Can't wait to see what their new flavor is. Make sure to use the promo code LOCKEDON15. That's LOCKED15 at all capital letters, all one word, and you'll get 15% off your next order of Built Bars at Built.com. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter, joined by ESPN's Brooke Pryor. Brooke, we're going to go over our Locked On draft. Now, for those who might have missed when I explained this earlier, maybe like last week and all this week, it was played out. We were all on a Zoom. All of the Locked On hosts, all 32 teams were represented, and we went one by one, just picking who we think was going to get picked. Who our team, we think our team would pick that we cover, or picking who we think our team should pick. So everyone had their different philosophies, and I kind of teased who I picked here. Here's a quick rundown for you guys. Just a little image here in front of on your screens on YouTube. I picked Joey Porter Jr. at 17. I talked to people about trading up, wasn't getting deals that I liked from what I heard, but here's how the board fell. You had three quarterbacks coming in the first four picks: Bryce Young to the Panthers, C.J. Stroud to the Texans, Will Anderson goes to the Cardinals, then Anthony Richardson goes to the Colts, then Tyree Wilson goes to the Seahawks at 5, and then, as Brooke and I were talking about before the show, Kalijah Kancey went to the Lions at 6. That is a whoa, don't think that's going to happen, but okay, Kalijah Kancey's off the board. Then Jalen Carter goes to the Eagles at 7 as they traded up with the Raiders. Christian Gonzalez, the first corner coming off the board, goes to the Falcons at 7. Then Jackson Smith-Njigba to the Bears at 10. Devin Witherspoon to the Raiders. And then Paris Johnson Jr. to the Titans. Quentin Johnson to the Texans at 12. Peter Skoronski to the Jets. Broderick Jones to the Patriots. Lucas Van Ness to the Jaguars. And then Brian Branch to the Commanders. So, Brooke, looking at this board, I had Joey Porter Jr., Myles Murphy went right after him to the Lions at 18. There's Dalton Kincaid, there's Jordan Addison, there's Michael Mayer, there's Deontay Banks, Zay Flowers, who Mel Kiper, one of your colleagues at ESPN, has had going to the Steelers, Kelly Ringo, and Darnell Wright, who I think a lot of people are thinking, that's the one I would have gone with here, Chris. Brooke, you look at this board. Who do you would Joey Porter Jr. be the pick that you would have gone with, or that you think the Steelers would have gone with, or is there another move that you think that is available here?
No, I'm on board with you with Joey Porter Jr. Because it kind of feels like a couple years ago when the Steelers drafted Najee, right? It made too much sense to not happen. That's how I feel about Joey Porter Jr. Everything about this pick is a signature Steelers pick. Not only are there the bloodlines and those connections, they need a corner. He's the best press corner in the draft. The Steelers don't traditionally draft corners well, and so I think that this gives them an opportunity to kind of rewrite some of that history, correct that, and because they brought in Patrick Peterson, you've got a ready-made mentor for Joey Porter Jr. already in the building. I think it's too much sense that if that is what's available, that's the pick I'm making. I was surprised looking at how the rest of the draft shook out that there was such a run on tackles. There afterward. It kind of, I think if I'm Omar Khan and I see that happening and Darnell Wright goes off the board, I may be trading up there to get a guy like Anton Harrison or Osiris Torrance. I know he's a guard, but to get one of those linemen. Yeah. Once Darnell Wright goes off the board, because it's not as deep. I think that the corner class is deeper than the lineman class.
I agree entirely.
In this draft, but I still think that if a premium guy like Joey Porter Jr. is there at 17, I'm taking him, and then I'm addressing offensive line with my second first round pick, kind of.
No, yeah, basically that was what we've been talking about all offseason. This is basically a first round pick just without the 5th-year extension at the end of it. You're getting it at 32 because of the Dolphins forfeiting their pick. And yeah, I'm with you. It was also kind of crazy. I was sitting there during this mock draft, and imagine you get out of the top 10 there, and all the offensive tackles are on the board. And I was like, man, there's only 6 picks and 3 tackles. Just give me one of them. And I was sitting there, and then Paris Johnson Jr. goes at 11, and then Skoronski and Jones back-to-back at 13 and 14 there, which I think is how something like this is going to play out. I think that there's going to be – we see it every year. When teams are gauging what player is going to go next and who they can get and when they see that first guy go off the board, the next person, the person after that are going right with them. And I think that's what happened here at offensive tackle. I did try to trade up to get one of these guys. It was going to cost way too much. I also explored trading down with some other players, but I was just like, man, with Joey Porter Jr. sitting there, the value that I know the Steelers have placed him and the value that I have in him, and just watching his tape, seeing what he plays, I agree, best press corner. I think that he could very much fit the bill of a long-time Steelers cornerback, the obvious blood ties, and I think he carries that demeanor with him that they want with it. He knows what it's like to be in an NFL locker room from his father. And that's something that they have a value in. Mike Tomlin's talked about that a lot before. Not being surprised about any part of the process is knowing how you don't get these certain days off. There's some guys that get to the NFL and they think, oh, well, I've made it, I can do this. And it takes an adjustment period to understand the pace of how you're training, how you're preparing, and then how you're playing, and then you're getting right back to preparing. Joey Porter Jr. is not going to have those questions because his dad lived that life and he's grown up in it. And I think the Steelers, they've remained very close to him. Mike Tomlin used to go to Joey Porter Jr.'s high school games out here in Pittsburgh. So that being said, that's why I went with him there. It just made too much sense. I was tempted with Darnell Wright there because, man, he looked like a dominant offensive tackle, and could they use a dominant offensive tackle? Brooke, what are the chances that you think that they go for a Wright instead of a Porter in that situation?
I still think that Porter is the pick there.
Yeah.
Because they have that 32. It's tough to say. I don't know. I still go with corner because look, Chukso Okorafor and Dan Moore Jr. were not the best last year.
They were not.
They did get better, right?
Yes.
I think that they're still going to upgrade the offensive line. To me, it's not as much of a pressing need. Don't get me wrong. There's still pressing needs. It is a 1A, 1B situation. But I think to set up for the future of this team, you really need to add to the corner room. To me, it's just you don't add Patrick Peterson if you're not planning on bringing in a premium draft pick if he's on the board. So, man, that's a tough one. I still think it's Porter.
I'm right with you. The only hesitating point that I have there is what we talked about. Tackle is not as opportunistic in the second round as corner is. Like let's say Darnell Wright's the pick there, I'd still be happy with a Julius Brents and Emmanuel Forbes. There's a number of guys that I'd be like Kelly Ringo, Cam Smith, and be like, man, that guy could really work out and could be your guy. But Joey Porter Jr., we've talked about this all offseason. You and I talked about this at the combine when we were all scrambling to get to him when he got to the podium. But it's him, Witherspoon, and Gonzalez. That's the first tier of cornerbacks. And after that, there is a drop-off there. And again, this is all expectations. This is just us with projections. We don't know how actually all their careers are going to play out. But just looking at their measurables, what they all bring to the table, he's still with that class of corners, which is why I think, and I think you think, we're on the same page here about him being the pick there at 17. But of course, with all the picks that we've seen here, that now means with down and all the picks being made, and if there's 31 there, that means that the 32nd pick is now to the Steelers. And with this board, we would know that if this was the situation that played out, who the Steelers could take at 32. We'll address that in a minute here, right on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Brooke Pryor of ESPN. We'll be right back. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Brooke Pryor of ESPN, breaking things down. Now, Brooke, again, going back over the situation there, Joey Porter Jr. would be the Steelers. If we went with the mock that we did with Locked On, he would be the Steelers' 17th overall pick. Then right after him, just to go over other players that came off the board, Miles Murphy, edge rusher, goes to the Lions. Bijan Robinson goes to the Bucks right after that at 19, running back there. Adetomiwa Adebawore, I think I just butchered that man's name. He went to the Seahawks at 20. Dalton Kincaid, the tight end, goes off the board to the Chargers. Then Jordan Addison, wide receiver, goes to the Ravens. Then finally, Will Levis goes off to the Seahawks, who traded up to get him there. Then the Dolphins, of course, forfeit their pick. Michael Mayer, the Packers traded back to get a pick, and they got him there. The Giants take Deonte Banks. The Cowboys, Zay Flowers. The Cardinals, Kelly Ringo. The Bengals take Darnell Wright. Lions trade back up into the first round again, getting Osiris Torrance. Then Anton Harrison goes to the Bucks, who also traded up, and then Nolan Smith, the last player off the board. So that being said, we have 5 offensive tackles run off the board, several cornerbacks, a couple wide receivers, a couple tight ends. We have a couple edges off the board, and now we see how the board lays out. If we're looking at this, the Steelers are sitting there at 32, and Brooke, there's been an interesting question as far as if the Steelers are going to trade back. Here's a question from our friend James from Pennsylvania, who wanted to ask about what to do with that scenario. Here's James.
Hey, Chris, this is James from Pennsylvania. My question is about the 32nd overall pick. A lot of people are talking about trading the pick back and getting a lot more draft capital. However, if there was one player that fell out of the first round and the Steelers couldn't give up on that player, who do you think that player would be? That we just had to get him at 32nd overall.
There you have it. The question from James. Thank you, James. By the way, you can always call into the show at 412-223-6644. Leave your name, where you're from, and keep your question under a minute. We'll get you on the show. But Brooke, to his question, we talked with Omar Khan about this at the Combine, and he talked about, yeah, sure, the phones might be lighting up at 32 after the first round's over. And the question would be there is what would it take for the Steelers to move off that pick? But I guess James's question is more so, what would it take? Who would be the player that you think the Steelers would just be like, nope, we're not passing up that guy in that situation? Is there a person that could slip out the first round that could get your attention like that?
Oh man, that's a tough one. I was going through my list of guys that for names that I was looking to see if they popped up, and Bryan Bresee, I think that's how you say his last name. I really hope that is. And if his handle on any social media at any point in time wasn't Easy Breezy, something, whatever numbers or, exclamation points, I'm going to be really disappointed. I really like him. And the Steelers have needed some defensive linemen, some younger defensive linemen that could be, if not day one starters, at least at some point in their first season starters. And I know that they re-signed Larry Ogunjobi, Cam Hayward's still there. There's still some quality guys on the defensive line, but I think that's a position that really needs to get restocked, that they need to put a premium on adding some of that depth. So that's one guy that I would consider as a can't miss prospect there at 32. I'm drawing a blank on some other names, but Bryan Bresee was one that I kept scanning up and down that list to see if he was still there.
Well, I'll give you some other names here that would still be available. Darnell Washington, the tight end out of Georgia, who also had a top 30 visit. He also, like Bryan Bresee, they both had top 30 visits, and the top brass of the Steelers visited their pro days, which usually when you get both of those, that's a good sign for you moving forward. But John Michael Schmitz, the center out of Minnesota, would be another one. But because they took Joey Porter Jr. in this situation, you take off corners like Julius Brents, Emmanuel Forbes, guys like that. But another defensive lineman who might be in that conversation is Keanu Benton out of Wisconsin, who the Steelers have also met with. Now, they didn't go to his pro day because Wisconsin's a little different, but there'd be guys like him, Mazai Smith, the defensive lineman out of Michigan, Jack Campbell, the linebacker out of Iowa. Guys like that, I think, could be interesting. Or, maybe edge rusher is the answer with Felix Anudike Uzoma out of Kansas State. There's guys like that who I think all of those are in that range there. But I'm with you. Defensive line, the Steelers, as much as we talked about how Joey Porter Jr. could be there to learn from Patrick Peterson and grow into the guy of the future, The Steelers have Cam Hayward and Larry Ogunjobi. We don't know how much longer Cam Hayward's going to be this Cam Hayward. We seem to be saying that every year and he maintains it, but eventually he's going to get older. He's going to fall off. He's not going to be the same guy. It would be nice to get your next super defensive lineman of the future now and pair them with DeMarvin Leal and say, look, you two, learn from these guys. Understand this is what it means to be a Steelers defensive lineman, both in the run and the pass. And then whenever Ogunjobi and Hayward's, their times are up, you got two younger guys on your roster who've developed under them and they can pick up the torch and carry on forward. I like your way of thinking there.
Yes. That's honestly, that's all the validation I need. But yeah, I mean, all of those things are why I think that he's a can't miss prospect at 32. He also comes from the Steelers really like big name, big brand schools. Yeah. Clemson obviously fits that bill, a Clemson defender especially. Mm-hmm. I think that that's just a guy that has everything you want. And similar to the Joey Porter Jr. pick, you get him in the building when he has a good mentor and role model ahead of him in the group. Although, I think the number of times that we say, I don't know how much Cam Hayward's got left. I mean, he's going to play till he's 50 at this rate, right?
Sometimes it feels like that. Yeah.
Every year that we question how much longer he can keep going, it's like it just makes him more and more immortal. So he's welcome for us continuing to question that if that's what is actually making him stronger. But yeah, I think that pick just makes a lot of sense because John Michael Schmitz could also be another one of those. But no, I think that Bryan Bresee checks all the boxes that I would be looking for that would make me not want to trade out of that spot.
Let's play with this scenario that we've now created. Joey Porter Jr., cornerback in round 1. Then we at 32, we're saying the Steelers go get Bryan Bresee. I keep messing his name. I don't know if it's Bresee. I keep looking it up, like, oh, that's what it is, and then I forget it as soon as I do a show. But the defensive tackle out of Clemson, we got you got those two guys. So now the Steelers are sitting at 49. We don't have to name names, but is offensive tackle almost a must there, or do you go edge rusher? Do you go linebacker? Because the Steelers have set themselves up where they could address several different directions at that point.
Right, and I think that is the key to all of it. I think you have to just look and see what the best value is left on the board. And because of how they've set everything up, yeah, if the best value is offensive tackle, yes, absolutely do it, no questions asked. But if there's a guy that you have rated higher on your board at an edge rusher or at inside linebacker, to me, they have done a good job of not painting themselves into a corner in any pick, no matter which way the board falls. And that the same can't be just said for every year that they've gone into the draft when they've had some, must address needs. I think that, if they obviously don't get a premium tackle this year, then that puts even more of a stressor on next year's draft and next year's free agency, or even, looking to pick up guys after training camp cuts, free agents off the street, things like that. But to me, they have the flexibility that they could get a wide receiver with that other second round pick.
I agree. They could.
I think that their options short of quarterback or running back are pretty open, even tight end, if one of the top tier guys is there, happens to fall that far. I don't think he will, like the tight end from Tennessee, I don't think is going to fall that far in the draft, but if it happens, sure, why not?
Yeah, I'm right with you. And again, it's like you said, it's always playing the board, making sure you're paying attention. That's how they got Cam Hayward. They said, when they drafted Cam Hayward, we thought he was going top 15, and we're sitting there at 31. Like, how is he here? So yes, we're going to take him. The same thing happened with David DeCastro when they picked him. So the Steelers are going to be patient. I think that there's the chance to be there. But then again, this is what we talked about coming into the show. Where will we see the aggression? Will it be there where they're saying, you know what? we see that guy, we see that tight end or that offensive tackle that's been slipping down, and we don't want to wait until 49. We want to go up and get that guy and make sure he is that guy. And then, of course, there's the potential we talked about earlier. Bryan Bresee, yeah, that's attractive, but what's also attractive? Maybe getting another second-round pick on top of what you already have, and then going into it with 5 picks in the top 80 instead of just 4. And maybe that's me being a little bit greedy, but I think the Steelers are in a position where that aggression can be had. Whereas, say they pass up on Bresee, sure, that's unfortunate, that you don't get to get that guy. But let's say let's say that there's a guy available that's still around, like Mazai Smith for Michigan. Maybe he's still available when you trade back. Keanu Benton is a guy who they've brought to the facility to talk to him. And you could say, you know what? The drop off between Bresee and Benton or Smith isn't that far. We're going to take that chance, and we're going to get another pick so that we can do all these things and get the tight end and the linebacker and have my cake and eat it too type of a situation. So I think the bottom line here is, Brooke, is that Omar Khan has put himself in a position to do whatever he wants. And if we try to paint the Steelers into a corner, we can completely miss entirely what their draft plan is.
Exactly, which, it can be frustrating because then it feels like we're just throwing out all the possibilities and saying, hey,
we are.
It's going to be one of these. But that's what it is. That has been, I think, the thought process and the mindset. All free agency is to give them this versatility. I mean, we talk about whenever they're looking to add guys to the offensive line, you want that position versatility and flexibility. That's what they also want out of their draft picks, that, they can be a chameleon, they can adapt. And the Mike Tomlin phrase that I think of all the time is, we're going to have a hardcore plan, but be light on our feet. I think that is probably the approach that the Steelers are taking to the draft. I think that every team takes that within reason to the draft, because you have to be able to change things on the fly. But I think especially this year, that's kind of the mentality the Steelers have to have going into this draft.
Absolutely. Brooke, thank you so much for all the insight that you bring from your work at ESPN. Let people know they can find you, follow you, get more of your work, and anything that you got coming out that they need to read before the draft.
Yep, it's all on Twitter at BE Pryor and on ESPN.com under the NFL page. And you go to the Steelers tab. And I am not sure what I will have between now and the draft, but what you can look for is a profile I did on Joey Porter Jr. that ran last week, a deep dive on just why the Steelers really like second generation players and kind of what kind of edge he has after learning from his dad.
Yes, indeed. Do read that. I did check it out. That was very great work for Brooke Pryor. That's why we love having her here. Brooke, we'll have you back on again soon, a lot sooner than we did the last time, because we love to get your insights here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com, where you can check out all my work on the Pitt Panthers. They have a lot of players who are probably going to be drafted this year. You want to look insights into that? We have all of that right there. Also, you can find my work here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, Monday through Friday on your favorite podcasting app or YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all those daily episodes. We're back next week, Monday, the week of the NFL draft, breaking things down, giving you some final looks into what the Steelers' plan is. Stick with us. Have a great weekend. We'll be back getting you ready for your Pittsburgh Steelers.